Yet today, over 1,000 days since the full-scale invasion, Ukraine continues to stand strong, and NATO stands strong with Ukraine. We provided, through NATO, critical non-lethal support. We created the NATO-Ukraine Council, which met just again here in Brussels. We've launched a new command, the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine Command, to coordinate future efforts and to help speed Ukraine's path to membership. The United States has been surging our own resources and security assistance to continue to help build up Ukraine's air defenses, its artillery, its armored vehicles. We are determined, and it's fully my intent and the President's intent, to spend every cent that we have available from the $61 billion that were authorized by Congress in the supplemental appropriation. With the G7, we're finalizing moving out the door $50 billion secured by frozen Russian assets. At the same time, NATO allies and partners of NATO are sharing the burden and shouldering even more of the responsibility. Germany, for example, just made a pledge of $680 million in new military aid. Bulgaria, Czechia, Sweden, others providing personnel to this new NATO command. All told, the United States has provided $102 billion in assistance to Ukraine, our allies and partners, $158 billion. And as I've said many times before, this may be the best example of burden sharing that I've seen in the 32 years that I've been doing this. And of course, when it comes to our own investment, most of it has been invested in our own defense industrial base to produce weapons that Ukraine needs. But those investments are strengthening our defense industrial base, and they're providing good jobs in the United States. We welcomed the Ukrainian foreign minister here to NATO, along with the EU's new High Representative, Kaja Kallas. And in doing that, we reaffirmed the commitment to Ukraine's defense and to its irreversible path to NATO and EU membership. We continue coordinating to ensure that Ukraine has the money, the munitions, and the mobilized forces to fight as necessary through next year, or to be able to negotiate, but from a position of strength. Ukraine also shows that European security and Indo-Pacific security are intertwined. Over the past 4 years, we've had an unprecedented convergence among allies on the challenges that China poses to transatlantic security, and that includes its critical support for Russia's defense industrial base, which enables Russia's ongoing aggression, and intensifies what is the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. But this growing convergence here in Europe on the challenges posed both by Russia and in different ways by China, and then growing collaboration between allies and partners in the transatlantic area and the Indo-Pacific, that is a hallmark of the last 4 years. As these threats evolve, as they transcend regions, we've significantly increased engagement beyond NATO, from the Indo-Pacific to the Arctic to NATO's southern flank, reinforcing a 360-degree approach. King Abdullah was just here with us yesterday, and we were very glad to have him at the ministerial. We look forward to opening the NATO liaison office in Amman next year. It'll be the first in the region to further strengthen the relationship between NATO and the Middle East. But what I want to emphasize is this. All of these efforts are not taking NATO out of area. Out of area has been coming to NATO. And that's why it's so imperative that we work together to strengthen our capabilities, to strengthen our capacity, to strengthen our focus on these different challenges, because they're having an effect within the transatlantic community. This evolution is critical so that NATO can continue to adapt to the world as it is already and as we see it evolving. We're at a critical moment for Ukraine and for the defense of the transatlantic values on which this alliance was founded. Over the last 4 years, as I said, historic strides towards strengthening the alliance, which has made America and the world safer. I think this is a time for every ally to lean in, not lean back. Every dollar that the United States puts into our shared security, whether it's deepening cyber defenses, whether it's strengthening our defense industrial base, it's an investment that redounds to the benefit of people across the alliance now and for years to come. A stronger NATO means more capabilities to deter aggression, more effective allies to meet more complex challenges, and the peace and stability that allows our people to pursue fuller lives. And maybe that's the final and most important point, and I want to emphasize this. In the United States, throughout Europe, around the world, people want peace. They don't want war. They want to avoid conflict. And what's so important to understand about this alliance is where it came from and what its purpose is. NATO came together after 2 world wars as part of a series of institutions that were built to try to ensure that we never had another global conflagration. And what's so unique about NATO is the compact that each of its members make, that an attack on one is an attack on all. What's so powerful about that is it tells any would-be aggressor, if you go after one of us, you're going to have to deal with all of us. That is the most powerful deterrent to war breaking out in the first place. That is the most powerful deterrent against aggression. It's not a surprise that Russia has not attacked directly a NATO member. So when we all talk about this powerful desire to avoid conflicts, to prevent wars, to have peace, the best way to do that is through our ongoing investment in the world's most successful defensive alliance, and that is NATO. Thank you.
The first question goes to Michael Birnbaum with the Washington Post.
Thanks very much. Michael Birnbaum, Washington Post. Secretary Blinken, President Zelensky in the last few days has signaled some openness to abandoning Ukraine's effort to regain all of its territory by force in exchange for NATO membership. I wanted to ask what you thought about that strategy, if you thought that was a good idea, and particularly if you thought it was realistic, given that President Trump is about to come into office. And second, a question on South Korea and President Yoon. And maybe some of us in the press corps were with you in March at the Summit for Democracy in Seoul. Was it a mistake in retrospect to host a democracy summit in South Korea? And are you concerned that Kim Jong-un is going to use this moment of instability in South Korea and transition in the White House to stage a provocation? Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So with regard to Ukraine, the most important foundational proposition is this: Ukraine and Ukrainians will decide their future. Any decisions that are made about how Ukraine engages the Russian aggression, where it wants to go, what it wants to do, these are decisions for Ukraine and its democratically elected leadership to make. And so from day one, we've repeated and we adhere to the mantra of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Well, Ukraine has to make these decisions. I think what we're working to do in the time that we have left is to give Ukraine, to give our own country, to give all the allies and partners that support Ukraine the strongest possible hand to use next year and beyond. If Ukraine determines that it needs to continue the fight, we want to make sure it has what it needs to continue that fight: the money, the munitions, the mobilized forces. If it chooses to engage in a negotiation, and that assumes, of course, that Putin and Russia have any intent of doing that, then, again, we want to make sure it's from a position of strength. And from my perspective, I think what I'm trying to do, not just with Ukraine, but across the board, is to give the incoming administration the strongest hand to play in all of these areas, and to pass the baton in a way that they can hit the ground running, because the world doesn't stop just because we have a political transition underway in the United States. So that's what we're focused on. That's what I'm focused on in the remaining time. When it comes to South Korea, let me just say this. We're obviously watching the developments very closely. This is one of our closest partners and allies around the world. We welcome President Yoon's statement withdrawing the martial law order, and there was a unanimous vote in the National Assembly to reject the decision, and he followed up on that. In our judgment, any political disagreements need to be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law. Korea has been an extraordinary story, an extraordinary success story over the last 3 or 4 decades.